And I lied, one more question. We're actually, the one thing we didn't touch on in terms of testing is stereotype threat. And the impact of stereotype threat on student performance on high stakes testing. So I'm just wondering if anyone can speak to that, and if not, I'll speak to it. Oh, yeah. Well, so stereotype threat, there's a big body of research in psychology around the way we cue to people who have been stereotyped what the test will mean for them impacts their performance on the test. So if you tell Asian women, if you prime for them Asianness, right? Stereotype on Asianness, on math. What's the stereotype?
Good at it.
Good at it. If you prime Asianness, students who've been studying math who are with Asian women will perform fairly well. If you prime gender, if you prime their femaleness, the same caliber of students' performance will go down. So what that's telling you is the way you even talk about and position the test impacts performance. Okay, there I just answered that. So the question is, to what extent has there been any examination of that in the context of the SHSAT? There, I made it a question. So Josh, can we just start with you, but I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to chime in while we gather your questions.
Yes, and I'll be brief. I'll just take the first question, right? What do we know about the SHSAT and what don't we know about the SHSAT? And I think I'll just summarize it to say I think that what the department has done is commissioned a study some years ago that showed that the SHSAT identifies kids that go on to do pretty well in high school. No surprise there. I think what we don't know is whether it's the best way to do that, and whether there aren't better ways to identify the students in our system that can succeed in specialized high schools. And I think we've heard a lot of reasons tonight why we can have a better and fairer way to do that, relying on middle school grades and state test scores to identify those students. And we can tell that it's better and fairer by the result, because we find students that, I hadn't talked about this before, that the cohort that would be picked by that method has exactly the same GPA, 94%, and almost exactly the same state exam scores as the cohort that's selected by the specialized high schools. I think just reinforces to everybody that better, fairer method selects students that are high achieving, talented, driven students, but ones that we find all over New York City instead of just a few neighborhoods. So I think we know the SHSAT picks high achieving students, but there are better ways of doing that, and that's what we're proposing.
Did anyone else want to weigh in on that question?
A couple of things about the exam, and one you were asking, I guess maybe Dr. O'Leary was asking, but what is the exam intended to measure? And that's one of the problems I have with the exam. An exam like that should have some hypothesis about what abilities are needed in high school to succeed, and then should devise a test that will assess those abilities. I've never seen anything like that about the SHSAT. I think if the city is going to use an exam, they should have some hypothesis about what the abilities are, and then have a test that will assess that. In terms of the actual success of the exam in measurement, I think something else that if I could show you a picture, I would, but I will explain it to you. We would like to see a nice linear relationship between the results, the criterion, grade point average, and the exam. And in fact, you don't get that with the SHSAT. What you find is that students at the extreme top, if the lowest admission score for any of the schools was 479 in the year I looked at. If you looked at students who were getting, say, 625 or 650, they all did pretty much, they did well in high school. But as you get down towards the cutoff, it's a mess. It's just, you have no idea that you find students just above the cutoff, just below the cutoff. Some of them may have GPAs of 50, some of them may have GPAs of 100. It's not that you know that the ones below are all going to do well, it's the fact that around the cutoff, you really just don't know anything. They're all over the map. And I think that's an important thing to understand about the exam.
Anyone else? Okay, thanks. Let's get a slide. And I'm just going to let you all weigh in on the other questions after. Okay,
This
thank
is
you.
kind of an illustration. I didn't want to use it before, but it's relevant. 479 was the cutoff score a few years ago for the Brooklyn Latin School. The error of measurement was about 20 points. So if you set up a vertical 20 points below, and you compare the distance between that line and the midline, you find, and I took this from John Taylor's work, that 1,592 children fall in that band. So the question is, are they as good as the ones who perhaps made the cutoff? How would that look in terms of your question, ethnic, what the ethnic breakdowns are, I don't know. John, correct me if my interpretation is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, what the standard error of measure means is that if you gave the student the test 100 times, 68 times out of that 100, they're likely to score within 20 points. That means many times they're likely to score 32 times, not with even in that range, but even so, that's a very big range. And another number I think that is worth looking at when I do look at the predictions, that there's something called the standard error of estimate. When you use the exam to predict the student's high school grades, there's an error of estimate, it varies from school to school, but overall, I forget, it was maybe on the order of 8 points, which means that there's a 68% chance, if you predict that the student's going to have an 85 average, there's a 68% chance that it might be as high as 93 or as low as 77. So that's not a great deal of confidence to have in the prediction, which is not to say that it doesn't measure anything. It measures something. You, as I said, it would reduce your errors by about 20%. And which shows that it is tapping some of the abilities that are required for success in high school. But what I will just add one thing, that this the achievement test, which predicted 28%, if you use both of them together to predict, you still end up at 28%. Using the SHSAT along with the achievement test doesn't really buy you anything. And the reason for that, I assume, is that the abilities, and the SHSAT does measure relative abilities, but whatever those are also measured by the achievement test. And the same is true if you combine it with grade point average, with 7th grade GPA, where you predict 43.8% with the 7th grade GPA. If you add the SHSAT to it, you predict 44.1%, which is again a negligible increment, which suggests that whatever it is that the exam is measuring is also covered by the 7th grade GPA.
Can I say one thing about success? We're measuring success in terms of numbers, and numbers are very mythical and magical, right? Higher scores on the test, higher GPA, but success is a qualitative and a subjective measure to that too. So like kids who get 98, 99 averages end up in somewhat mediocre careers or kind of middle of the road, and kids with 70s and 80s end up doing phenomenal things. So I